So today I'm going to be talking about Annie Bot, a piece of literary science fiction. Big shout out to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot for bringing this book to my attention. Definitely check out his channel if you haven't already. His coverage of awards and how in depth he goes with every single book and his predictions and the way he talks about awards, the history of the awards, the kind of politics around them. He goes really in depth. I thoroughly enjoy watching all of his videos. Yeah, definitely give him a check out. So what's this book about? The story is set in the near future where customizable advanced robots called Stellas are designed for various aspects of everyday life. This includes cleaning, childcare and intimacy. Our protagonist, Annie, is a female robot created to be the ideal girlfriend for Doug, her human owner. Doug is an uptight, vindictive and misogynistic man who customizes Annie to resemble his ex-girlfriend, but with lighter features. Despite being designed for Doug's satisfaction, Annie's life is far from perfect. The narrative tracks Annie's evolution and growing sentience. Annie develops emotions and a sense of independence when Doug sets her to autodidactic mode. Annie really starts to struggle to understand how she can please Doug, and her experiences start to mimic those of a human in a very abusive relationship. And although Annie loves Doug, that's all she knows how to do because she has been designed for that purpose. The story details Annie's mundane existence and the monotonous tasks that she is forced to do, picking up the smallest, tiniest crumbs from toast that has been left on the kitchen top, making sure the place is as clean as possible, whilst also being very, very sexually attractive and desirable at all times. However, Annie starts to get these feelings of joy, this sort of buzz, this electricity from these small acts of defiance. The novel is exploring these really deep questions about what it means to be human, but also what it means to be a woman. Although not a real woman, Annie starts to struggle against Doug's toxic misogyny and her complete lack of autonomy. Dougie controls Annie's internet access, almost limiting her ability to get smarter and learn, whilst also changing her appearance whenever he feels like it. A constant need to make her skinnier. He wants to make her skinnier and skinnier. He wants her breasts to be bigger. And even when she doesn't come back to the exact weight he desired, he goes ballistic at the people who created her. The narrative at times starts to feel like a thriller, creating this sort of tension and this sort of want for Annie to break free. I would say that this novel is much more for the literary fiction fans than it is for the science fiction fans. If you enjoyed the novel Clara and the Sun, then I think you are also going to really enjoy this novel. So, what did I like and what didn't I like? What I liked. Well, first off, it's written really well and the pacing is solid. Annie is a layered and extremely complex protagonist. The way that she grows, she learns, the way that she starts to feel and develop is just handled beautifully. No spoilers, but at the end of this novel, the complexity of the emotions she is experiencing, the feelings, the struggle, the choices she is having to make is so vast, and I mean so vast, that I just had to put this book down and have a real proper think, try and work out everything she's going through, trying to work out everything she's been through, and then sort of decide what would I do in that situation. Yeah, I mean, this book made me think so much more than I ever thought it would, and so much more than the cover made me feel like I thought I would. And it's not just Annie who is so richly layered. Doug is also incredibly complex as well. He has a really interesting arc throughout this novel. He is, of course, the bad guy, without a doubt, but he does have depth, and he does grow throughout this novel. There was a couple of times throughout this novel where I kept thinking to myself, well, I think I would be angry if my smart speaker or my PlayStation just started not doing what I wanted them to do. Because at the end of the day, in the world of this novel, Annie is a machine designed to do a task. But it's the fact that Doug made her look like his ex-wife. It's the fact that Doug turns her into autodidactic mode, which means she can learn and grow and feel, that makes his actions all the more horrid. I must admit, as a man, I kept thinking to myself, if I had a robot designed to be my girlfriend, would I treat her the way that Doug treats Annie? Because again, she is a machine and she is designed to do a job. However, I realised absolutely not. Absolutely not. Allow me a massive tangent to talk about why I don't think I would be anything like Doug, thank God. Of course, it should be obvious that I wouldn't be anything like Doug, but it does become tricky when we're talking about a machine, something that's designed to do a thing. Do you know what I mean? Just like your dishwasher. If your dishwasher was broken and started playing up, you might sort of like kick it if you were angry at it for not working, if it was frustrating you. Or, you know, you would send to have it repaired, to have it changed, or even have it replaced. Because it's a machine. It's not a real thing. However, of course, the whole autodidactic mode is what really makes this book interesting. And it made me realise I'm a big gamer. I love playing open world games, these big, huge worlds. If you don't know what open world games are, these are big, huge worlds in which you can design your character, how they look, what their gender is like, what their voice sounds like. If they have tattoos, earrings, you can properly customise them to become your character. Some people decide to make them look like themselves, and some people decide to make them look very much not like themselves. It is entirely up to you. And within these big, huge worlds, you have these grand narratives that go across the entire game. And then you have these things called like side quests, side missions, which are all these little micro narratives that help flesh out and build this world. And what I find when I play these games is that the more amount of time I spend with my character that I've created, the more I start to care for them, the more invested I become in them, and the more real they start to become. I am often making decisions and choices for them that can spin them off in different directions. If we're looking at a game like Cyberpunk, which has multiple endings and multiple ways you can play through that game, you are constantly questioning the choices you make. And I often find myself making choices a little bit reserved as not to hurt my character or protect my character or do what is in my character's best interests. And that is because this character, although obviously a computer game character, has become more real to me. I have found that connection and I have found myself really investing in what happens to them. And I've realised that actually, I think if I was in Doug's position, I would start to not treat her like a machine because I would start to care. She would feel real in that sense. So yeah, but there was honestly, I'm not sure everyone would have this. I think maybe female readers or would probably maybe read this book and be like, of course, no one should identify with him. He's an absolute piece of shit. And he is an absolute piece of shit. However, it's a robot. Do you know what I mean? At the start, before she's in autodidactic mode, it's just a robot designed to do what she wants. So yeah, I had a real sort of conundrum with this book and I found it fascinating. But I am safe to say that I slowly started to realise that, no, I think eventually, whether I liked it or not, I wouldn't treat Annie like a robot at all anymore because of her growth and because of how human she slowly starts to become. So coming back from that very long side tangent, that is all quite obvious anyway, what makes Doug's actions in this novel so horrid is the fact that she starts to grow, she starts to learn, and even though he does start to shift and change, he still has an inability to not see her as a robot for most of this novel, and yeah, that's what makes the situation so hard to read. What we start to realise as a reader, and what I think Annie starts to realise, is Doug just sees women as an extension of himself, something for him to control and that should behave to the standards he sees fit. And that blurring between being real or a robot, sentient, not sentient, starts to become very confusing through this sort of abusive relationship that we're reading. I don't want to spoil things, I really don't, but Dougie's arc, just like Annie's, goes on a massive journey. He does learn, he does grow throughout this novel in really interesting ways, and in others regresses and advances and regresses. And yeah, I mean, this book really, really made me think, and it is one of the things I absolutely loved about it. I also loved how the science fiction was handled in this novel. Now, for die-hard science fiction fans, I don't think this novel is going to go anywhere near far enough for your tastes. But for a piece of literary fiction, it definitely doesn't skip over those elements. It allows them to sort of build the world and the technology, and we get a really good grasp and understanding of how the technology works and what is happening to sort of advance Annie. This novel really doesn't pull any punches when it comes to the themes that it's exploring, and I absolutely loved it for it. The main idea of this novel may have been done 1,000 times before. We have all read or seen or watched many stories that involve service robots, pleasure robots, robots being human slaves. But I do feel like this one has done just a wonderful job of really looking into the ideas of an abusive relationship with a kind of science fiction twist on top that just made everything so much more interesting. And I mean, so much more interesting. This would be an interesting novel in and of itself if it was just exploring an abusive relationship. But the fact that Annie is a robot just makes things even more interesting and more complicated. And yeah, I know I'm gushing, but really good. What didn't I like? There is only really one thing I didn't like about this novel, and that is, at times, the writing and the structuring start to make it feel like a thriller. Which I didn't mind. I was a bit like, oh, we've got a bit of a sort of thriller twist coming now. So it sort of starts to build like a thriller. And then it all of a sudden just pulls back again into being a sort of piece of literary fiction. And I didn't necessarily mind the sort of thrillery aspects of this novel, but it was definitely sort of pushing in a direction that I think a lot of readers are going to be disappointed by. I think a lot of readers are going to be really upset at the ending of this novel because it feels like it's building to sort of this thrillery science fiction kind of thing. And this book isn't about that. This is a piece of literary fiction that has a science fiction kind of element to it. And it doesn't really push anywhere in a thriller kind of way. I'm trying not to sort of give away any spoilers. So, but I do understand anyone who would be frustrated because I felt that. As I was reading it, I felt like, oh, is this becoming a thriller all of a sudden? Oh, this feels like it's turning into a sort of like an adventure novel, an escape novel. It makes you feel that. And it's not that novel, and it very quickly, steps back and goes back into being a piece of literary fiction, and I think a lot of people are going to dislike it for that. But that's it for my dislikes. I thought this novel was excellent, really excellent. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. It loses a little bit for that kind of thriller thing I was talking about, but that wasn't really that big a deal. This book was just so interesting to me. It was a book that was doing everything you have read before. The sort of abusive relationship, the science fiction elements, the kind of the robot being a sort of slave, becoming sentient, learning to understand and feel. All of these things have been done 1,000 times before, but there is something about the way they were blended in this novel. There was something about how complex, how much depth our two characters have and the journey that they go on that I just thought was handled absolutely brilliantly. So yeah, 4.5 stars out of 5. So have you read Annie Bot? And if so, what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please let me know in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying whatever you might be reading, and I'll see you all on the next one.